Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to be guiding you through today's topic, because we're about to unpack one of the most fascinating and honestly kind of mind-bending quirks of the human brain. We're looking at the Mandela Effect and the architecture of collective memory. Now, have you ever been completely certain of a fact? I mean, something you would literally swear on your life was true, only to look it up later and realize you were just completely wrong? It's a pretty jarring feeling, right? But imagine that exact same thing happening, not just to you, but to thousands, or maybe even millions of people, all at the exact same time. Well, that's exactly the journey we're going on today. And it brings up a really fascinating question right off the bat. Can a massive crowd share a false memory? I want you to really think about that for a second, and maybe even question the reliability of your own mind. You see, we tend to treat our memories like a highly secure, perfectly recorded digital archive, like a smartphone video, right? If we remember it, it absolutely must have happened. And surely, if a huge crowd of people all remember the exact same specific detail, that consensus totally proves it's real. But as you'll see today, human memory is vastly more complex, incredibly subjective, and highly susceptible to collective error. Okay, let's dive straight into this with Section 1, the illusion of memory, a psychological glitch. So, what is the Mandela effect exactly? Well, it's defined as a psychological phenomenon where a large group of people share a false memory about a common event or image. And honestly, every single word in that definition carries weight. First up, it's a psychological phenomenon, meaning it's not magic and it isn't some sci-fi alternate universe. It's a scientifically recognized glitch in our cognitive processing. Second, it involves a large group of people. We're not talking about one person just misplacing their car keys here. This is a widespread, synchronized misfiring of recollection. And finally, the memory itself is undeniably false. It's both terrifying and utterly intriguing to realize that a massive group of human beings can be so completely, uniformly, and confidently wrong about our shared reality. Let's transition over to Section 2, Coining the Term, featuring Fiona Broome. So, the year is 2009. We have to highlight this specific year because, despite how common this phenomenon has probably been throughout all of human history, we didn't actually have a name for it until pretty recently. 2009 was the year this quirk of our collective memory finally got its official title, and the person who coined it was a woman named Fiona Broome, who actually worked as a paranormal researcher. And her story brilliantly illustrates the exact origin of the term. You see, Fiona Broome misremembered that Nelson Mandela had died in prison back in the 1980s. She didn't just have a vague, fuzzy feeling about it. She had a distinct, concrete memory of this tragic event happening decades before it actually did. But here's where it gets wild. When she started sharing this memory with others, she discovered she wasn't alone. A surprisingly huge number of people shared this exact same, completely fabricated memory. And there's a fascinating bit of irony here for you. It was a paranormal researcher, someone whose whole career was dedicated to looking way outside the bounds of traditional science, who ended up putting a name to a purely psychological internal phenomenon of the human brain. Which brings us to Section 3, the ultimate reality check, false memory versus history. Now, what's really interesting about this is sharply contrasting that widespread illusion directly against the undeniable facts. On one hand, you have the false memory. A huge collective of people were absolutely convinced that Nelson Mandela's story ended in tragedy within the walls of a prison in the 1980s. But then reality paints a completely different picture. Not only did he survive prison, but he was released, he went on to become the president of South Africa, and he lived a long life until 2013. The gap between what the crowd confidently believed and what actually happened in the real world is absolutely staggering. Let's just slow down for a second and walk through the factual timelines step by step to really give true history its proper weight. In 1990, the actual reality is that Nelson Mandela was released from prison. I mean, that was a monumental global event. Then, from 1994 to 1999, he reached the pinnacle of his political triumph, serving as the South African president. And finally, it wasn't until 2013 that he passed away. When we lay out the facts chronologically like this, it completely shatters the false memory established by Broome and so many others. It proves just how wildly inaccurate our internal records can be when compared to documented, undeniable history. So, what does this all mean for us? It leads us to this final, lingering thought. If a large group of people can completely misremember such a monumental, globally documented event as the life and death of a world leader, how fragile is our shared reality? What else might we be misremembering right now, collectively in this very moment? It really forces us to realize that truth isn't always found just because a crowd agrees on it. And that's what I want you to take away from today's explainer. Memory is an architect that sometimes relies on imagination rather than actual blueprints. Keep questioning, keep verifying, and thank you so much for exploring the fascinating limits of the human mind with me today.